Absolutely. So I will call to this meeting of the ACTC to order. It is being recorded for posterity and official FOIA records. This meeting is being held via MS Teams due to the COVID-19 emergency. So we have done with the legal parts. I am Josh Fulb, the chair this year of ACTC. With us is lots of people, and we will end up going around briefly and just saying who we all are, but we'll start with our vice chair and then our staff liaison.
Hi, I'm Vice Chair Elizabeth Kiker, and I just want to emphasize that Josh is not chair for this year, but for many years to come. I mean, wasn't the like last like I think he served 4 years, so like you've got to beat his record, I think. Yeah.
You're talking to somebody else, I'm sure.
All right, and I'm Kristen Haldeman with APS Multimodal Transportation Planning, and I'm the staff liaison to the ACTC.
Great. So I'm going to go down this list and hope as new people come in that it simply comes down the list. And so I'll go in like groups of 3 and we just run ourselves through this. So Catherine, John, and Christine, in that order, want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, everybody. I'm Catherine Frum. I'm a teacher at HB Woodlawn and happy to see everybody, sort of.
Hi, this is John Chadwick. I'm Assistant Superintendent for Facilities and Operations. I'm delighted to see everybody too. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christine Baker. I am with Arlington County's Transportation Engineering and Operations Group, and I also am our Vision Zero Program Coordinator. Good to see everyone.
Thank you all. Dennis, then Eric, then Jillian.
Hello, everyone. Dennis Leach, Director of Transportation, Arlington. Glad to be here.
Hi, this is Eric Goodman. I think I am still the representative for the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. I'm not sure what John Armstrong's role is, if he will be in this position or not, but as of this point, I'm representing the Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
Jillian Burgess, I am representing the Bicycle Advisory Committee.
Awesome. Thank you all. Lauren Way, and then Mr. Gordon.
Hi, everyone. It's Lauren Hassel, Safe Routes to School Coordinator with APS.
Hi, everyone. This is Hui Wang, work for Arlington County Transportation Engineering and Operations.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Juan Gordon. I'm a liaison from the Budget Advisory Committee. Thanks.
Thank you all. Lynn, Melissa, and then John.
Good evening, everyone. This is Lynn Rivers. I am the Transit Bureau Chief for Arlington County.
Wonderful. And Melissa, maybe you're on mute.
Good evening. This is sorry. Hi, I'm Melissa McMahon. I work in the Commuter Services Bureau for the Division of Transportation. Thanks.
Good evening. This is John Mickovice, APS Director Internal Audit and an APS commuter.
Adam, Nancy, and then Janeth just joined us.
Hi, Adam Rasmussen, and I represent the FAC on ACTC. At least I think I do. And last year I was. We haven't made decisions yet this year, so I'm assuming that I am until otherwise told.
Am I up, Josh?
Yes, please.
Hi, Nancy Van Doren, School Board Member Liaison to ACTC. Happy New Year.
Thank you. It has to be better than 5780. Janeth, I think unless you should be here with us,
yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm Janet Valenzuela, and a parent leader at different schools on the South Side, and I'm also a community leader. Thank you, and Happy New Year.
Thank you. If I missed anybody, if you'll just turn your mic on and say hi real fast, otherwise we'll proceed with the agenda. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the agenda here. So we did the meetings, did a slightly longer roll call. I'm going to look for a motion to approve the June minutes. I sent those out a couple times. I got no feedback back from them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they were perfect. So if someone who has read through them would like to offer a motion to accept them, that would be wonderful.
No feedback because they were perfect. This is Elizabeth Kiker.
I'm sorry? I had two people, I think, at the same time. Janet, I think you were about to do the motion there.
Yeah, yeah. I said the motion to accept the minutes from last month. I mean, from the last meeting.
This is Elizabeth seconding.
Awesome. Are there any notations or corrections to those minutes? Hearing none, if you can, the easiest way for us to do this is to go into your chat function and to just say yes or no to that if the motion is to approve the minutes. If you don't have the chat function, you can come online and give your name and say yes.
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 Well, I believe that is sufficient. The minutes have passed, so thank you very much, and thank you all to giving your time both to read those and all the other things we've been sending out. So we have some updates, and I will turn this over to Kristen. Kristen, do you want me to end my share so you can put some stuff up here?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to try first just to share from the Engage site just the schedule for the elementary school boundary process. We're kind of about to get underway with that process this fall, and let me just do my sharing and hope for the best. Okay. Here we go.
As we say, and may teams forever be in your favor. And it looks like, yes, we have your screen up with the
Yes.
meeting engagement.
Right. Thank you. We have liftoff. Okay. So I think as most everyone knows, we have the new construction going on at the site known as Reed near the Westover Library. And the construction continues at pace. And so we still are planning to have that elementary school open in the fall of 2021. So in order to assign students to the school, we will be undergoing a boundary process. And there was a preview of the fall process at the school board work session in August, at the end of August, you can see from the schedule. And on Thursday, superintendent will have a monitoring report to the school board as well. Staff has been working over the summer on data analysis, worked with communities, I think in the spring, to set us up for the data analysis that we need to do. And so starting on October 5, as you can see here, which is 2 Mondays from now, they will post the draft boundary scenarios, begin some of the outreach for some of you that have been through the elementary boundary process before. We've got a community questionnaire that will go out in English and Spanish about boundaries. And as it says here, you can also provide input via phone lines over voicemail. So there's a meeting, this virtual meeting on Monday the 5th. We'll meet with advisory group reps and elementary school PTAs just to start the process rolling and get the information out. Community meeting on October 7th, Facebook Live on the 9th, and then another virtual community meeting on the 13th of October. We've got some open office hours also in October. Several opportunities to do that. I see October 16th, October 17th, October 20th. Questionnaire will close on the 20th. And there'll be another school board work session on the boundaries on October 29th. The 5th of November, school board info item, some more Facebook Live videos, and then we've got the school board public hearing on December 1st and the adoption of the new boundaries on December 3rd. So I wanted to have this update this evening, just so those of you who are reporting back to your schools and into your communities, you can point them to the Engage website. And I'm going to just pop the URL into the chat, and you can take that with you.
And Kristen, when you're ready for it, one question came in from Jillian is, do we know when the engagement process for the key boundaries will be happening?
You know, I do not know at this point. So I think there is, I think that is still kind of a work in progress. I don't know if Nancy has any more information on that at this point. I think, and actually, let me come back to the question.
Is the question about the immersion boundaries or about the boundaries for the school that will be at the key site?
Yeah, thanks, Nancy.
Which is the question?
Yeah.
Okay,
The immersion.
There is no discussion. I have not heard a discussion about immersion boundaries to date, so we'd have to go back and ask about that.
Okay, it's just confusing because the new site for Key is not in its boundaries. So,
Okay, I'll take the information back. I don't have an answer for you right
yeah,
now.
no, that's fine. That's just where the confusion is.
You might want to chat with your principal.
I think we have, and we're still confused.
Okay.
Okay, I'll take that back. And we've got the meeting on the 5th as well, where we can raise questions at that point as well. Any other questions on this one?
The chat is quiet. If anyone wants to throw a hand up, throw something in the chat, or turn their camera on to talk. Otherwise, we'll move to the next section. We say at our other meetings, seeing no one moving to a microphone, we'll go to the next section.
Okay, I'm going to unshare that and back to the agenda. I do have it up. Let me see if I can share that.
I can put the agenda up if you want to prep for the next item.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks.
And okay, you're live. So the next item up is the ACT Leadership TDM project.
Oh, right. Oh, that's me again. Right. So our dear friend, Elizabeth Denton, who left the area in June and went to work for the Association of Commuter Transportation, actually sent some of her colleagues to me over the summer. They're part of a leadership group with ACT. So that's her group, ACT. And so they
give me that again. ACT stands for what?
The Association of Commuter Transportation. And that's, so Elizabeth works for them now. And one of the groups that she works with in ACT is a leadership group. And so within that group, the participants all have, projects that they go through. So it's like a, 6-month or 10-month leadership program. I'm not sure how long it lasts, but yeah, they're looking for projects. So she sent them to me to see if there's anything they could do on the school side that might help us with information that we might need coming out of this COVID situation as people start going back to work. So I don't have a report from them yet. It should be forthcoming, but we talked about understanding, first of all, how people used to travel at APS, and then using that to kind of figure out, okay, what has changed with those modes due to COVID, and how can we help people who may not want to drive to school with more information about options that they maybe used before, or how do we get them to try a new option? So they will be looking at, how transit has changed and what the opportunities there are. But one thing I did ask them to focus on was to see if, to tell me some more about biking and how we might promote biking to school for our staff. And I know we've got a good, I think we have 70 or so of our staff who at least have taken advantage of the bike benefit over the past year or so. But kind of given the interest and the growth in bike ridership during this period of COVID, and people finding it as a good way to get around where they can be under their own power and get some exercise. I asked them to kind of, focus on that if they would, to come up with ideas for how we can promote more biking amongst staff. So with that, I sent them off and gave them some data, and they'll be providing a report probably in the next week or two, just to at least a draft, to give us information that I hope will be useful for staff as we go back. Let me get out of this. So I just wanted to kind of let everyone know it was out there. And I see, yes, Elizabeth, you're right. It was very sad to say goodbye to Elizabeth. Yes, we do hate to lose a good Elizabeth. Luckily, we have other good Elizabeths. So were there any questions about that? Once I have a report available, I can send it out just for folks to see, because I think the information will be useful, certainly not just for our staff, but as others are trying to get around sort of post, or actually we're not post COVID, in COVID, and try to get back to some semblance of normal. What does this look like
at some point in the after times?
Right. Yeah.
So if there are no other questions, or if anyone has a question, raise your hand, turn on your microphone and camera, or put it in the chat for this one on Leadership Project. Seeing Jillian says that sounds like a great project, so yes. Do you need next up is Vision Zero? Do you need the screen for this one?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll steal it. Hi, everyone. This is Christine Baker. We are at another key engagement point for our Vision Zero program. And I'll pull up our project schedule real quick to give you an update, because we have pushed back our target adoption date to May of 2021 based on some of the challenges we faced in the staffing. Sorry. We got delayed earlier this year because of the pandemic and, some staffing issues. So we are looking at May 2021 for adoption. And then we are right here, September, October 2020, doing engagement on safety needs. And we're also working very hard internally, having lots of different conversations with lots of different departments to formalize some of our plans and see what we can develop for our action plan. And then we hope to have a draft by the end of this year, and then we'll have another engagement in early 2021 to get the public to review what those draft actions look like, and then we'll be wrapping up in the spring and targeting that adoption. So we're really excited to be moving forward on this. And I've pulled up the Vision Zero website so you can see it's the Get Involved page. And we've got our public engagement checkpoint 2 open. We've got public meeting on September 30th. This one will be in Spanish at 7 o'clock. And then we'll have one the following day, October 1st at 7 p.m. In English. So one in Spanish, one in English. They're virtual meetings and they'll be posted online afterwards. So if you can't make the meeting, no worries. You can view the meeting online following that. But the benefit of watching it live will be a live chat. So we'll have lots of county staff behind the scenes helping answer questions as folks send them in. And then we'll also have a Q&A at the end. So we're really excited about these public meetings. We're really excited to offer a specific Spanish speaking meeting since, you know, one of the big goals of Vision Zero is to make sure that we have an equitable system for everyone. So, you know, that we want to make sure everyone can understand. And then we'll have an online feedback form open so you can share your feedback. We have an English and Spanish form that will lead you to an interactive map. And that interactive map is going to help us collect information about where there are perceived safety issues, where there might have been near misses, things like that. So we're really hoping to get as many people to complete the form and to engage on the map as possible so that way we can get as many data points. So I sent a flyer to Kristen and I think she sent it out to this group earlier today, and that has links. And more importantly, we want you to share that beyond, you know, where we're currently sharing it, because we, you know, have all of our media outlets as the county, but then we know that all these different groups extend even further out into the community. So please share far and wide. We would really like your help getting people to engage, because the more people we hear from, the more we're going to know about, you know, the safety of our system. And since we aren't able to offer an in-person public meeting, we have a call-in line, and that way it allows people a different outlet to reach us other than just the internet. So the call-in line is also on that flyer and it's on the website. And that's a way that you can engage through a phone system rather than doing the online form. So that's a pretty cool thing that we're doing. We also sent out postcards. So we're really trying to expand the reach here. And all this information is really going to tie into the action items that we're working on internally. And that will really help to guide the plan. So this is a really critical point. We're really excited, and there's just so many conversations going on. It's really cool to see all the departments interacting and offering different ideas and committing to things to help make Arlington safer. So we're really excited, and I'm happy to take any questions on that effort.
Well, thank you for that. One request I'll have, I know we've sent that stuff out to the information out to the group. Can you put that that URL right there in the chat box so we have it as well, in addition to everything else we've sent out? And if anyone has any questions about this Vision Zero project, if you want to either turn your camera on, raise your hand, or put something in the chat. Jillian Burgess says, thank you for the Spanish meeting along with Janet. They're going to share them. Elizabeth says, I love the energy around Vision Zero. It feels like this has built quite the momentum. And so if there's anyone else who wanted to add any questions to this.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me after the meeting too, or give me a call. I'm happy to chat about anything. So, you know, feel free to reach out.
Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. It's exciting stuff. Next up, it's like we're going to be returning right to Kristen again for the county use permit for the TDM conditions revision. So I will drop my share and we'll see where Kristen, are you putting up next for this?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So hopefully we'll get this up. I'm going to try and share. Sometimes I have problems with PDFs. So let me see.
While Kristen's getting that up, I'll say we're missing a few people tonight's meeting because the middle school back to school night was scheduled for the 17th and then got redone to tonight. And so we are missing some valuable voices in the room, but they are also doing important work related to middle schools. So.
Okay. Is there a slide on the screen?
Yes, we are good.
Yes. we have lift off. Okay. Okay, so with this item, there are a couple folks who have been instrumental in getting this process done, who are here with us tonight. Melissa McMahon, who introduced herself at the beginning, from the Commuter Services Bureau, who worked diligently with myself, and Jeff Chambers, who is also here, from the APS Design and Construction Office. Design and construction are the part of APS that really had been dealing with use permits the most, and primarily with our new, either completely new buildings or additions. So I wasn't sure how familiar everyone was with sort of use permits. Dennis, I was wondering if you could chime in and just kind of give a brief sort of 101, like, why do we have use permits? I mean, I put it in the email to everybody, but you maybe just a quick overview for everybody who's here tonight, just to say what they are, why we use them, and that'll, lead us into the next stuff.
Sure. So basically, there are a couple different ways that development happens in Arlington. One is called by right, which just goes by the zoning ordinance, and it's an administrative process. Everything else either falls under a use permit process, which is a little bit more involved, or if it's very involved, it's a site plan. Any new schools or additions to existing schools require a use permit from the county board. And the TDM provisions were developed incrementally by school addition filing or new schools. And so there wasn't standardization across all of the school use permits. So this effort, which Kristen and Melissa took on for quite some time, was to really trying to create a common frame for all of the TDM conditions around that are embedded in the use permit. Hopefully that helps.
Yep, thanks, Dennis. And I know it's probably sort of a little bit maybe an arcane concept, for everyone. How many of us, deal with use permits on a regular basis? Probably not many. But as Dennis said, these conditions for TDM had sort of evolved over time, sort of, piecemeal, catch as catch can. So when I came on board with APS and we started looking at some of the TDM conditions for some of the new projects, and then kind of comparing them to the old projects, and we'd have to go back and find out what an old one said. And, some of them were pretty different. Some of them had provisions in them that we weren't really necessarily able to hold to. Some of them had budget implications, and the school board sets the budget, so those were areas of kind of concern. And then we had some that were getting some that were very short. Some, as we got through this, started to get much longer. And then as I looked at some of them, I thought, well, I'm not sure that necessarily applies to a school context. And I think what had happened is that, in the early days, we started looking at the use permit conditions for like commercial properties or residential properties, which had a little bit of a different functionality than a school, or in this case, a system of schools, because we have multiple buildings, of course, and what we're finding is that it's we needed the consistency in order to stay on top of everything, and then we also really wanted them to work within a school context, so that they would work, because the goal was really to reduce congestion, not only around schools but in the county, and to again spread our transportation demand out along our network, so that we didn't have any one piece of the transportation system overwhelmed. And
Kristen, John wanted to jump in on this one as well.
Oh, John, yep, go ahead. John?
Everybody, I'm really sorry, everybody. I'm trying to multitask here. Your meeting is more important, though. I was going to just reinforce what Kristen said. She took my hand down when she mentioned that the use permit conditions really started out for commercial buildings in the urban corridors. And so slowly over time, we've eked away at that to make it more appropriate for schools, most of which are not in the urban corridors. And Kristen and Jeff really put final touches on that to get them really organized for schools. So they really should be given credit. We've finally got where we need to be.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John. And of course, we wouldn't have gotten there, without the staff role, and certainly, Dennis helping to ensure that we could make this happen. And I don't know if Kevin Lamb is on. Kevin is with.
I wanted to say I was remiss in not saying county staff put a huge amount of effort into it too, and it's really a good show of collaboration between our two governments.
Indeed. So Kevin is with CPHD, Community Planning and Housing, and he is helping us now to shepherd this through the process of getting it approved by the board. Melissa, I don't know, did you want to add anything to that? If not, I'll kind of get into the main areas of revision.
I'm good over here. I'm happy to answer questions, or maybe once you've gone through main areas of revision, if there's any additional examples that pop up for me that are worth illustrating, I can do that. But I'm mostly here to offer support and answer technical questions.
Okay, thanks. Jeff, did you want to add anything? If not, I'll just move into the next section.
I think the only thing that I wanted to add was just the fact that this somewhat came out of necessity as well, because every time we did as we were adding new buildings with use permits, we were finding we were not fulfilling our requirements of evaluating our existing, and we also couldn't meet certain requirements. And I think it led us to some frustration, and we were also seeing an evolution in other changes into the TDM requirements in the use permits. And what we felt is if we had a standard use permit for everything that we have and make it retroactive to every project that we have, we would be able to know when we had to do evaluations, and we would make sure the evaluations gave us the tools and the information that we needed to do what the intent of the TDM was. So the bottom line was, with all of the different requirements, it wasn't serving the need or the purpose that it was set up for. And we feel this will allow us to be able to follow through and get useful information, as well as follow up on all of the schools.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Okay, so in terms of the main areas of revision, and I sent the documents out to you, they're fairly similar. We do have one that's called a short set and one that's a long set. And the longer set of conditions are for the construction, new construction, or additions, which are new construction. But anyhow, and typically the difference between the two, or generally, is that there is a more robust bike parking element in the long set, because when we have new construction, we have an opportunity to add things like bike rooms and lockers and showers and things like that. The short set of conditions are generally for sites that are not getting new construction. They might have a change to something on the site, and the main change that we've seen recently is the addition of our portable classrooms. So there's no construction, and with that, not a whole lot of change other than adding the portable classrooms. So we wouldn't expect to see new construction of significant bicycle facilities. So you'll note that in the short set, while we do have bicycle conditions in there and bicycle parking, they're typically, what you would see at a school site, which is the addition of bicycle racks and that kind of things that we can do relatively simply, like through our operating budget. And then most of the other conditions tend to be the same. And we are Another thing that we did too was every school that has a use permit has a site transportation coordinator, and this is typically an administrator or a teacher, someone who has a number of other duties at the site. So we wanted to take this opportunity to sort of streamline the role of the site transportation coordinator so they would know exactly what is expected of them, and how to do what is expected of them. In the longer set, as I mentioned, we have the bike parking, the more robust bike parking. And with that generally comes a management plan. And so we've got the site transportation coordinator who typically is managing that. That had been a separate condition, and that was brought into the TDM revisions because it seemed to make sense that the site transportation coordinator would also help manage the bike parking. And for the new construction sites, that might include providing access to a bike room, assigning lockers and things like that. For a site that has a short set, it would simply be making sure that there's adequate bike parking, and if it looks like we need additional bike parking, to let us know, primarily in the facilities and operations office, so we can come in and add as needed. It also standardized our TDM benefit availability across all of our modes. And one thing that APS had done before I joined APS, which was a good thing, was that we opened up the transportation, the TDM benefit, monthly benefit, to all schools. So prior to that, it was only the schools that had new construction where the benefit was being offered. So I think John had the presence of mind to say, hey, I think we really should open this up to everyone. It's kind of an equity thing. So what we have done then is sort of standardize the availability of the benefit and just the description of what the benefit is. There was one, we had one older version of the conditions that specified a dollar amount associated with a particular mode. And so this way we've kind of given everybody, all of these permits will have the same language in it about the benefit and the availability and the budget associated with it, or how rather we deal with the budget associated with it. And then it ties that benefit to the school board approved budget, rather than having it sort of be something that comes from the county to us, where we have two separate budgets, but at least this way we're tying benefits to what the school board approves. And then finally, probably one of the areas of most significant revision was in the performance monitoring section. And what we have realized over time is that APS collects a lot of data related to TDM performance. So we have our enrollment in the TDM benefit program, we have our APS Go surveys, we have our Safe Routes to School tallies. So rather than coming in and doing like a traffic count on a given day, we're able to take data that we have that is more robust and really more applicable to what's going on, and gives us a bit more information about the transportation at the site. So within the performance monitoring section, we have now said that we will use the data that we collect to monitor our sites and to understand what's happening with respect to drive alone rates, and then rates of the use of other modes. And that'll allow us to come in and kind of target certain schools that maybe could use an extra push in a certain direction. And again, this will be in sort of hopefully the post-COVID era, but if we have a site that may not have a lot of transit use, but it's very close to a transit line, we can go in and say, well, why isn't there more transit use, and try and promote more transit use. So things like that. And then we had a very generous offer from the county to help us can create a dashboard where we can pull all of our data together and make it kind of easy to plug in data and pop out a report that will tell us what we'd like to know about a site's performance. So let's see, that's all I had on my bullets. Melissa and Jeff, did I miss anything? Is there any other areas that you thought were significant revisions, things you wanted to note?
I think you covered them all. I mean, it was a long, arduous process, and I think we covered everything in there in the existing use permits and made the modifications, I think, that were in the best interest of the county and the schools.
Yeah, and from the county side, it was a very sort of satisfying project in the sense that we knew that the condition set that we've been working with and that evolved over time wasn't working well for school sites. And if it's not working well for school sites and it's not working well for county staff, it's ultimately not working well for the community. So one of our goals is to really have this great standardized set that that gives schools a better set of tools for doing TDM programming at these facilities, and to hopefully get the community even better outcomes. So it's a great.
And I think the other thing is those that have the short set, once we do a major project at those schools, they'll be going to the long set.
Yep, and that is a new evolution. So we do expect in the initial, and there's a bit of a phasing to that. So if there are questions about that, we can talk about that some more. But in essence, we're taking some schools that haven't had these conditions before, and we're giving them a reasonable time frame. And I think it was a couple years given the COVID situation and transitioning back to campuses and whatnot, but time to transition into their short sets and to essentially give that opportunity for all schools with use permits to be at that same TDM operating level.
And there is a question in the chat about bike lockers. If anyone has had any success fairly apportioning them, given the number, the cost, etc.
I feel like that might be more of a school-based question.
Well, currently at the Heights, there's lockers out back that are rarely used if ever anybody ever needs to use one in Roslyn.
So I'm trying to understand that. Yeah, and just to speak to the bike lockers for a second, the bike lockers, when they are at school sites, are intended for staff. So they're the long-term storage for any staff at the building, not students. And to some of the notes Kristen spoke to earlier, we haven't had a lot of luck with a few exceptions of getting major staff bike commuting uptake. And so our hope is bike lockers as a tool for fulfilling a secure bike parking need will actually help some school campuses provide bike parking in more sensible locations for staff, closer to the entrances, for instance, that they use instead of in one centralized room. And you know, as they get used, if we got to a place where a school transportation coordinator was reporting they had full subscription to all the lockers and they were out, that would be a great situation to be in. And then we'd be talking to Kristen and Jeff about how we can budget for more lockers going onto the campuses, and that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, in fact, Elizabeth helped us sort of uncover this is that, you know, staff who have their bikes, and I don't know, Catherine, if you want to speak to this at all, but they come in multiple entrances, and this is, I think, one of the areas that was sort of an artifact from the commercial or residential, where folks are coming in the same entrance, you're going up and down the same elevators, so you might take your bike down to the basement, put it in a room, and then up you go. Whereas with the school case, you have people coming in from multiple sides, so the bike room might not have been very convenient at all. So we are glad to have the opportunity to offer bike lockers at different locations as another option.
And to summarize, Jillian was asking about for lack of a better word, like upgraded bicycle parking options for, say, larger bikes or even e-bikes. Is that something that would be addressed in the future?
Kristen, I can speak to the first part if you want to maybe speak to the second. Regarding bike parking for cargo bikes and generally the exterior bike parking for students or parents. We are actually, so the school's implementation of the bike parking will always be responsive to the Arlington County bike parking standards. And so that guidance document is updated routinely, and it provides that design level of detail to give tips to all sorts of building types, but schools included, on how to provide adequate bike parking. And then when we actually do design review, which the county staff do for new construction projects, we look for that kind of thing in the design. So we talked a lot about how, for instance, Class 2 weather protected bike parking is not per se a requirement for schools for students, but it's highly desirable. And so if they can make exterior bike parking, even for students, be protected from weather under an overhang or something as part of the building design. A good example of that now I think is at Wakefield. And that's great for the students, that's great for everybody. And so similarly, looking to see that exterior bike parking locations have, for instance, bike racks that are cargo bike parking compatible, that give enough clearance in the back and on the sides for a cargo bike to be locked to them. So that's a great comment, and it's the kind of thing that wouldn't be in the condition set, but it would be in our guidance document and in our plan review.
Right, and I think on the design side, you know, Jeff, I know you all you have a variety of ways that you are providing parking spaces, certainly on the inside, in the inside rooms. And I don't know that we have gotten to the point yet of adding sort of extra large spaces, but correct me if I'm wrong.
I think we have, I've been sensitive to that where we can be. I think the best bike parking that we did, we weren't able to build. That was at the Heights, where we had a huge student covered parking area, but that was as part of the pickup and drop off structure under the field, which we couldn't build because of the fire station. And I'm not sure how we will be able to build that because the costs have doubled on us. But we are constantly looking at that as we do a project. We don't want to do freestanding standalone structures because they're just difficult to maintain. But if we can do it with an overhang or a structure that we can find a way to do that, we are always looking for those opportunities.
So, and I just wanted to make sure it's clear, elementary schools are unique or are different than commercial uses, and that you would expect more parents with young children, and therefore you would expect more cargo bikes. I've seen it myself at our elementary school. Every year, basically now it's every semester, there are more and more cargo bikes dropping kids off. And so elementaries in particular need to have a consideration for cargo bikes.
Jillian, this is Melissa. Can I ask you a follow-up question to that?
Yeah.
Are the cargo bikes, when parents are dropping their kids off with cargo bikes, are they parking them, like locking them to someplace and then going in with their kids, or are they like staging a la pickup drop off style and getting their kids out of the bike, waving goodbye, and then biking away?
So for drop off, so for pickup and drop off, yes, it's usually a traditional pickup and drop off. I will say that I don't know any school in Arlington that has actually thought about bike pickup and drop off. And every parent I talk to that uses a bike to pick up and drop off has sort of figured out their own way to make it safe, but it's not, the school hasn't been a partner there, and they should. But as far as the parking needs go, elementary parents are at the school all the time. There's meetings with staff, there's volunteer opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. So it is and you would expect that a family, unlike a family who bikes that has a middle school student and a high school student, where probably the student is on their own bike and the parent is on a normal size bike, a parent going to an elementary school is more likely to be on a cargo bike than a normal size bike. And so to the extent the parent will be meeting with a teacher or volunteering or running in to pick up a sick kid and therefore need to park, the parking also needs to have cargo options.
Yep. Thanks for that. That's helpful.
Yes, if it would be great if Arlington Public Schools could actually think about bike drop-off as they think about drop-off.
As we think about drop-off, well, and since we have sort of the short set that is being applied to operating, schools that are operating and not being have no construction, and we've got a couple of years to complete our short set. That could be something that we consider, as we work through this with the schools. Like, hey, where should we set aside some space for some bigger bikes? Yep. Okay.
So,
and that was actually my other comment, is that the school transportation coordinator should be responsible for parent drop off. I don't think that was explicit in the list, but that is something that I think especially the elementary schools, every school in Arlington has issues with parent drop off, and one of the problems might be that it's no one's job.
So I think this actually, Kristen, will segue nicely into our return to school planning. So I want to pause this part of the conversation on bike drop off so we can close out this and then move on to the return to school one, and we can pick it back up a little bit there.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to give the next slide is really just about what our next steps are. We're taking it on the road a little bit. So this will be on the agenda for our JCTC meeting on Friday, just to kind of let people know where we are with this. We'll go to the Transportation Commission next week on the 1st of October. I think that's Thursday. And then we'd like to talk to the APS Facilities Advisory Committee at their meeting on the 19th. And we will put in our application to the board for a board hearing in October, early October. I think it's the 5th is our filing date, with a hoped for anticipated board hearing in December. And hopefully we'll have approval at that point for the new condition sets. And then after that, we can begin implementation and then some template development. We've been talking with Melissa and her team about how we create, a kind of a template that just really helps guide everybody through the roles and responsibilities for our TMPs. And again, it's for APS staff, but also for county staff, because county staff come in on an annual basis and do sort of a compliance check with each school. And so this will help them as much as it helps us to sort of keep on track. So with that, I think that's, we had just two slides on this, but lots of good discussion. So I thank everyone for their input. And feel free to send any other questions that you might have. Thank you to Melissa and Jeff. And Kevin, if you were there, you are free to go.
Thank you,
Kristen. I appreciate it. It's nice to try to get something to be a cooperative effort that works. So we look forward to this being implemented throughout all of the schools. Thank you, everybody, for what you do.
Thanks, Jeff. Good luck with your tests.
Thank you.
Okay.
So did you have anything else on this particular set?
Nope.
Okay, so coming up next is return to school transportation planning, where I do think we have an opportunity to talk about the idea of more walking and biking, and then what that will look like, and possibly, one of the things I've said about this pandemic over and over is, we will get good things out of this. We didn't, unfortunately, want to lose 200,000 people to learn some positive lessons, but I think we owe it to them to gain something out of this. So as we talk about the return to school, if we can actually come out of this better, that would be awesome. So walking and biking, parking and walking, and school bus and other transit options are the three parts of this last part. So Kristen, take it away.
Okay, thanks. So I budgeted about 20 minutes for each piece of this. So maybe what I'll do is I'll go through the slides for each section and then take some questions, then we'll move on. I just want to make sure that we have time for each of the sections to talk about what we're doing, but I also don't want people to kind of lose sight of their questions. So I have this intro slide, and then we'll talk about walk bike, and then park walk, and then bus. Yeah, return to school transportation planning. The first thing I'm going to do is give a massive shout out to county staff because they have been so supremely supportive of our efforts in the walk and bike access area and the park and walk access area. I've got everybody meeting about 3 times a week. We have our 2 working groups. And each group meets at least once per week, and then we pull back together on Fridays just for a recap and a catch up. We've got groups on the county side from DES, which include not only DOT, but water, sewer, streets. And within DOT, we've got the heavy lift coming out of our TE&O team, who have been so instrumental in getting us to where we are, along with our active transportation group, Walk Arlington and Bike Arlington. And we've got folks who have literally been out in the field counting things like bike racks, doing walks, and parking spaces. So again, many thanks to all of those who are helping us figure out how we're going to safely get our students to school by multiple modes. So in order to kind of set ourselves up, one of the things that I did for our efforts was to create a transportation profile for each of our schools. I'm not going to pull that up now. It's a rather large spreadsheet, but we were able to use that. Using the instructional preference information that families gave us back in July, we were able to ascertain how many students at this stage were planning to go back to school when we opened in the hybrid model. And then from that and additional data that families provided about their transportation choices, we could ascertain about how many were going to be on the school bus, how many thought they would be driving, how many thought they would be walking or biking or taking some other mode. And so that really helped form kind of the basis of some of the work that we were doing. And sorry, I did not give a shout out to ACPD because they too are part of our team. And of course, they manage our crossing guard program, but we've also looped them in to some of the park and walk work because we're starting to look at how we're going to manage the transportation around schools once people start coming back. So again, many thanks to Dennis and his team. And even higher up to Greg Emanuel for really giving us staff to help support this project. The first group that we got together is our walk and bike access work group. And one of the things, I think we talked about this back in June, is that our bus capacity has been severely constrained. I think back in June, we thought we would have 12 seats for students. We now have 11 because we have to have an attendant on the bus that will be screening students at the bus stop before they get on the bus. So we're down to 11 students. So as we talked about back in June, a lot of this work is really to help us kind of reduce demand on the buses so we can make that transportation work. So when we expanded these walk zones, we're within the 1 mile policy zone, but in several cases, there's a challenging intersection to cross, but the students and where they live is just so close to school. We just got to get over the intersection. So of the 16 walk zones that we've expanded, 3 are permanent. Those I had been working on, a while ago. Those were Key, ATS, and Hoffman Boston. And then we came in and added 13 what I would call sort of emergency expansions. Some of those might end up sticking. but right now it was sort of a move that we had to make in order to regain some of our buses. So some of those areas are, the Fairlington area and Abingdon. We've got some families who live across George Mason from Claremont. Some who live across the bridge at McKinley. So again, about 13 additional locations. So this group, we reviewed some of the more challenging intersections. Lee Highway and Sycamore comes to mind as probably the biggest one we focused on because we've got a lot of Tuckahoe students that live across the road, across that intersection. And in order to give them a feeling of safety and security crossing there, we did work with ACPD to identify that as a spot for a crossing guard. So just as a reminder, crossing guards are hard to come by, that's still true today. But we worked with the police to look at the 10 areas that really need crossing support. And we're able to kind of come to the conclusion that 4 of them we will use crossing guards for because they are the most significant areas of concern. And then we have 6 sites where we will be asking for support from DES, Department of Environmental Services, because within DES there are folks who do traffic control and management when they work on construction and road projects. And so their water, sewer, street staff offered us assistance from some of their folks. And then we'll also be drawing in some folks from the CERT community. Those are the Community Emergency Response Team members, and they, I think, have been activated through COVID for their volunteers who also assist with things like this. So within those expanded walk zones, we sent out teams who conducted walk audits. And so I know we've got some folks from our walk audit teams on. Is Henry on? I don't know if Henry is on. But Lauren and Henry Dunbar and Katie Lang and Mary Dallow, and I think Evelyn Murcia as well, all went out and walked all of these areas and looked for not only comfortable routes to walk, but identified areas that might need some assistance or some improvement, whether it was overgrowth or needing additional, identifying where there might be sidewalk gaps, or needs for signage or signal improvements. And out of that came sort of a priority list. And in fact, we went through some of that today to find out, what can be done quickly of those priority needs, and then kind of what can be rolled out over time. And so our TE&O staff, Dan Neighbors, Christine Sherman, and their team, are kind of helping us or triage that list. And assign department leads, whether it's APS or it's Parks or TE&O, to each project for some action. Henry Dunbar went out and he inventoried all the bike racks at schools, and he uploaded those into RackSpotter. And so now that information is available to families. And in fact, I had one parent emailed me one day saying, well, my students are going to, I think it was the Career Center, and I'd like to know where their bus stop is going to be, and are there any bike racks nearby? So I popped up RackSpotter, and I said, guess what? There are racks nearby. So I was very happy to be able to make use of that tool to help a parent. The other thing that the group is doing is developing some walking school bus and bike train materials, because we want to offer that as an option to parents. And again, they'll look different than we might normally expect out of a walking school bus. We have some national evidence. I think it was Georgia, or maybe it was California. I can't remember. Maybe Lauren knows. They're calling them PED pods. Rather than walking school buses, because they're families who have kind of banded together and who are interacting with one another in either a pod or a bubble. And they are forming groups to walk to school together. So some, ours might look like that as well. And then finally, we have the Bicycle Advisory Committee. Thank you, Jillian. The Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Thank you, Eric, who are also on board to assist as needed. They had jumped in and, started looking at schools, specifically bike routes to schools. I think we're continuing along that path to find so that we can provide information about biking to schools. Because some of these areas, actually Fairlington, Abingdon is a good example. It's a little farther from school. It's right up to the edge of the 1 mile, and maybe that's kind of a hike for some little legs. But on a bike, it's not so bad. So, where are the areas where biking makes a lot more sense? And they're stepped in to help us do that. And so we had a nice conversation, I don't know, last week or the week before, with the BAC and the PAC. So I think I will stop there because it's a lot of information for me about what's been going on. So why don't we, take some questions here about this?
So, Kristen, what I want to start with is, and I'm getting an echo here, so let me back off a little bit. Okay. This would be a good time to talk about a couple things. One, the idea of if we're encouraging walking and biking to school, that there's going to then be a lot more walkers and bikers at school, and that dovetails into Jillian's question about having thoughtful bicycle pickup and drop off and parking and those items right there. So I think it's a good place for us to note that concern. A second thing to note that when we talk about these 13 emergency expanded walk zones, that if they work, and we have to do some recruiting, and recruiting equals money from somebody for permanently having crossing guards, that I would say crossing guards are a better use of the people's money than having to acquire more buses, and certainly far more environmentally speaking better. So those two things right there. Couple things in the chat, and I see John's hand. So let me let John Chadwick speak, and then I'll go to the questions in the chat.
Thanks, Josh. I just wanted to go back to something you said earlier about how the only way you can look at it and the way I can look at this pandemic is we better have some good stuff coming out of it at the end, because otherwise it's really a problem. We have to look for those opportunities. And I think this is really one of them. I think the work that's being done here is really extraordinary, and the collaboration between the county and APS is fantastic. And I just want to say, I'm hoping these can be permanent changes. And I think that as we move through the pandemic, we're going to find that this planning is absolutely vital and really, really important. And I really do hope that we all find a way, after all is said and done, to publicize and write about what we've done so that other people can learn, because it's really, I wouldn't say revolutionary, but it's extremely innovative. So I just wanted to say that, and it really is something good, I think, that can come out of the pandemic.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. Like I said, it's, no better way to honor those we've lost than to say we learned something out of this, because it's just, that's how I hope we accomplish this. I would hope we can expand these walk zones. I often tell my Florida stories that there was one intersection where I lived that was an 8-lane road and a 6-lane road, but it was 3 blocks from a school, and it required 4 crossing guards to make it work. But they did, because they just wanted to make that extremely busy street work and be walkable. So it's, hopefully we start testing our limits of what we consider tolerable to make work. So 2 things in the chat. Jillian asking about lead time that we'll have, so ramp up, because I think I'll dovetail into that. It's hard to go ask people, hey, you want a job as a crossing guard, and well, when would I start working? Oh, I don't know. So how much lead time would we be talking about? And Janet is asking about thoughts specifically to Carlin Springs Road. So Kristen, I'll let you field those any way you want to.
Let's see. In terms of Jillian, I don't know, John, if you want to comment on that. I don't know. I don't have a sense of the lead time. So, John, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
Yeah, I don't mind, but can you lead time for what? I missed that. I was distracted for a minute.
Lead time for returning to school.
So like when it's announced, like we will definitely, or almost definitely return kindergarten to school on October X, whatever. Is there going to be a minimum amount of time between the announcement and expecting kids to show up?
There has to be, because there's a whole lot of detailed planning that has to be done. And there will be another survey going out of parents as to what their intentions are for virtual or return and what their requests are or what their plans are for transportation. So there will be some time required for planning once we've got that. So yes, it will be some time in advance.
So I think that I speak for every parent who is considering hybrid and asking, hoping you can communicate this to other people, but asking if we know that there's a minimum lead time, if they could say it, because last we heard sometime in October, my kids might go to school and we don't know when, if we can rule out October 1st or October 10th or whatever, because we haven't heard yet, that would be helpful for the planning, not just of transportation, but everybody who's dealing with this.
So the earliest, so the first, as the superintendent has announced, the first students we're planning to bring back are special education students who meet certain considerations for one-on-one assistance. And the date that he had mentioned for that was October the 12th. I'm not sure we're going to make that date. And then there would be further phasing in. So I think the earliest it could possibly be is November the 1st for anybody else.
I think the superintendent will be speaking to this on Thursday, right, John?
Correct. There'll be an update at Thursday's board meeting.
Yeah.
So, and then Janice's question about specifically addressing walking, biking. Actually, we'll do all modes. Carlin Springs probably deserves its own bullet.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
So the issue with Carlin Springs, at least we haven't done any expansions to Campbell or to Carlin Springs Elementary, but Canmore, of course, has a lot of students who often, or at least in the past, would take the ART 75. Now the ART 75, of course, has some of the same, the ART buses have the same capacity constraints, very similar to what we have on school buses. So students are not going to be able to, pile onto an ART bus. So we need to find another option for them. And, when we were looking at Carlin Springs with the county for the pedestrian safety study, I mean, there's definitely been some improvements there, but I think, the big piece of it that I think we're going to have to focus on is the park and keeping students off of Carlin Springs to the greatest extent possible. So Janet, I sent you and Dave McBride a note just saying, well, what actually goes on, and what do you hear, and what are some of the concerns about that path? And so I've taken those back to our group. And we've got some parks folks on our group, our working group. So we're sort of asking them questions about park operations, how we can, improve that to make people feel safer there. But Janeth, you had also mentioned concerns that come from the community. So I think part of the communication plan that we have, and we are working, with the county on communication, will be to let communities know that they're probably going to see more students coming through the community and walking to school because they're coming off of the trail. And this is how we have to operate, because we don't have the ART bus for them, and Carlin Springs has its own issues. So we need to provide an opportunity and an option that it offers that sort of safety. So that's a communications issue, and we're definitely committed to getting the word out to the community that they need to expect students and respect students. And then, of course, you know, we have communications on the other side from schools saying, all right, listen, you're in a community, you know, let's make sure we're all respectful. So there's going to be a lot of communication around it.
I really appreciate, you know, what you guys doing, but now that we are collaborating closely with the county, I think we should take advantage and talk into trying to expand and somehow clean up the streets, the roads of Carlin Springs, you know, walking to Campbell, Carlin Springs Elementary, and Kenmore. These are very narrow. We discussed it before, you know, and then it's not being done so much of improvement. It is some improvement, not that what we expected. And as per the email, I mentioned there that sometimes the community and they don't want kids around their community, you know, but we need to have a way to improve this. And I envy sometimes when you guys talk about bikes, kids biking to school, and it seems like I live in a different city or different area that our kids cannot bike to school like the other schools does, you know, because we had a steep on the uphill steep on the both ways. So we need to start looking into this more close, with a more, I think, close mind. I mean, not close mind. Expanded our view on this and how we're going to take it from here, because we're talking about the South Side community, and then our main road is Carlin Springs. So if we don't get this fixed, this problem, we never going to have the community as you wish, you know, to have kids biking into schools.
So, Kristen, I want to summarize some things in the chat, just so we make sure that they stay on the record about this relating to the walking and biking Carlin Springs Road, which has been one of the subjects of this committee for years now, and some of the things we learned about the sidewalks actually completely abutting private property, not even easements. That, you know, things that came out of this committee included trying to remove poles from travels areas and finding out that there was no place to put them. So those were some frustrations that we continue to have on Carlin Springs Road. And then Catherine, Jillian, Elizabeth were talking about the idea of some things that were done in DC about lowering the speed limit significantly because of more people being out, how DC closed a bunch of roads and turned them into, you know, walking and pedestrian paths. And I live on Columbia Pike, my window faces it, and, you know, in the height of the pandemic, seeing the traffic count so incredibly low on that road, and hoping we could have done more for sidewalks. So I hear and appreciate all of those comments, and I wanted to make sure we put all those there, that Carlin Springs is an ongoing challenge, and one that is, because of how dense it is, it's worth our time and attention. So I want to be mindful of the time because it is 8:20 and there's 2 other sections. So if we have time, we can circle back to this. But I also think walking and biking alternatives and plans of walking and biking to school, including like bike drop off, et cetera, should be a continued focus of this group. So,
okay. All right.
Next up.
Okay, we'll move on next to the Park and Walk work group. So, as I said, I think we knew this back in June. Since we're going to be screening students on their way into school, we really can't do just plain old drop off anymore, because if a student is dropped off by car and then goes and does not pass the screening and their parent has left, the parent is going to be called right back. So you might as well just park and wait. So one of the things that we've been doing is to look at all of our school locations and, you know, conduct parking inventories around the 28 locations. We do know that, you know, there will be parents who drive, and certainly our data is telling us that. Hopefully we can chip away at that with the work we're doing on the walk and bike side of things. But I think we do have to will have to be prepared for parking. But we want this to be remote parking. So we've looked at sites that are nearby schools where you might have a church nearby or another type of lot where parents can go in and temporarily park. We're looking at parking in the neighborhoods. I talked to the county about RPP areas and during drop off and pickup. Relaxing enforcement in those areas so that parents can park and then walk their students in and not, worry about getting a ticket. So we've got, maps available for about 28 locations, and I'm starting to meet with individual schools to look at their maps. But the next step of this is to develop these maintenance of traffic plans for each site. And some of the things that might include are, identifying on-street areas to block off to add space for students to queue as they're waiting to get into the building, reviewing traffic flows. Are there areas where we could, maybe make the flow one way? And then identify areas that may need traffic management support. And then, as these are developed, we've also got our active transportation folks participating. So how does the walk and bike access piece, factor into the maintenance of traffic? And this could be the area where we talk about, managing bike parking as well. And, one of the issues with bike parking we just have to be mindful of is that typically, bike racks are pretty close together. So we're going to want to do some communication and maybe a little bit of training. I don't know if we need a little training video or something about how to park your bike safely and give your neighbor room to park. But we do want to be sure that the areas around school are going to be safe for our walkers and our cyclists. And now our car riders are becoming, walkers for more than just the going from the car door to the front of school. So as I said, I'm starting to meet with individual schools, primarily to identify their entry doors. Where, the bus riders will go in their own door because those students have already been screened. We're screening them at the stop. And so we need to get them in separately because they will not need to wait in the line for screening. So that'll reduce some of the demand on the screening at the door. I'm just planning, and I think I'm being conservative on this, but of like 30 seconds to screen a student. Hopefully it will take less. It's the temperature taking, it's asking the questions, and then on their way in. But a big piece of this too is, communications with parents about making sure that, your student is healthy on the way out the door. Because not only, are we going to need parents to wait on the parking side or on the drop-off side, the vehicular access side, but same thing with, walking and biking. If you sent your student to school, on their own on a bike or on foot, and then they get, they don't pass their screening, they're going to have to come back home. So, parents just either bring them in or make sure they're healthy on the way out the door. Because I think there's, the trying to bring kids into school is going to be, there's going to be a lot of activity at the front of the school, and we want to make sure that we've got enough room to space everybody out. So yeah, when I'm talking to the schools, we're looking at the doors, we're talking about communications, and then we're also trying to understand staff parking needs because we've gone through and we've done these parking inventories around schools, and in some cases the areas that our staff has identified as potential parking, temporary parking for parents, is actually typically used by staff. Science Focus is a good example. When we looked at the parking around Science Focus, our parking inventory team found the bridge, and they're like, oh, hey, here's lots of parking spaces on the bridge. But we had the assistant principal from Science Focus on our team, and she's like, oh, well, our staff actually uses that for parking. So we had to come up with some other alternatives. So that's kind of, how we're thinking our way through these things. The MOTs are going to be a little bit slower. Hopefully, as we kind of get used to them and used to the process, we'll get a little faster at them. But we basically want to have MOTs for all of our elementary sites first, because the superintendent has said probably the next group of students to come back after our students with significant needs for accessing virtual school. The next group after that will be probably pre-K through 3. So that means our elementary schools will be in operation. So I'll stop there. That's kind of the Park and Walk group. If there are any questions about that.
So questions about the Park and Walk groups. I think there's some manifestation here from things we talked about as a collective group in June in our meeting about the idea of designating these walkable routes. And so I think that's where that came out of. And then I was in the meeting of, is it JCTC, when they were talking last month about the idea of if we have these park and walk areas that are in she says RPP, the residential parking permit zones, that we want some kind of, or I at least expressed as a citizen of Arlington, wanting some kind of formalized plan with that, because you want to make sure that everyone's on the same page and a parent isn't doing the right thing and then comes back to a parking ticket that they weren't supposed to get and then had to deal with. So that's why we're talking about those ideas, and I think there's some great promise there. Questions about this idea? Either raise your hand, throw it in the chat, or turn your camera on. So seeing, hearing none, and if you think of something, feel free to put it in the chat and then we can talk on it later. This is the next part, talking about busing. I was telling Kristen in the lead up to this meeting, something I hadn't done for 5.5 months. I masked up, and I've tried ArtBus, and I tried a Metro bus, and I even tried a Metro Rail, just to be able to come into this meeting as just a regular person. And one thing, Dennis, you can smile about, I felt 1,000 times better on an ArtBus than I did on a Metro bus. You all have done great work on those green buses. Hand sanitizer right there at the door, signs marking off seats. But the catch to that is it really reduces the capacity of those ArtBuses significantly right now, and obviously warranted, but very much so. So Kristen, take it away on the next part.
Okay. So we're mostly focusing on, sorry. Oh, I had this, I forgot about it. Sorry, this was just a sample of our one of our parking inventory maps. This is Long Branch. So, the team is coming in and they're identifying, unrestricted parking areas. We're looking at lots at the school. And then as you can see here, we have other, we have street parking also available for, parents to park and remote drop. And then again, these numbers here are the doors that Long Branch will be using for their access. Number 2 is for their buses, because there's their bus loop, so students will go right there. And number 1 is for the other students who arrive by other modes. So when we start to create maps for getting students to school, we can start pointing people to the right doors. So that'll be part of this process as well. Okay, so bus transportation. I don't know if Kim is on tonight. I think she may have had a conflict, but right now we do have some buses in motion, which is very exciting. We have school buses that are assisting with food service delivery at 10 non-APS locations. I think this was something that the community had really been interested in, and I was just so happy that with the start of school we were able to add these additional sites. And it is my understanding that we're getting a lot of participation at these sites. And John, I can't remember what Amy said recently, but I feel like we almost doubled our participation between the first day of delivery versus like the next day of delivery. So I think it's.
I heard the statistics today. We served 5,100 last week, and I think it was just over 2,000, 2,200 maybe during the summer. So it's working very well, and those are very good statistics. And as I hope everybody knows, meals are free to anyone under the age of 18, at least through December, when the summer food distribution program ends, the USDA program.
Yep. The other thing that transportation has underway is there are 2 of our special education programs that are at out-of-county locations. They have welcomed students back to in-person learning. So we do have a small number of students who are attending 2 separate schools where our buses are providing transportation. Some of our drivers then have routes. But for those drivers that are not currently on a route, we have a number of them have been temporarily reassigned to assist in other APS areas. We've got needs. Some of them are helping at school sites, on administrative tasks, and I think some are even helping possibly assist with sort of classroom management. John, you may have a better sense of that, but it's good news because it's keeping our drivers active because we don't want to lose them.
That's correct. They're doing all sorts of things.
Okay. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about our general ed route planning. Dariba Reba, who is our route planning coordinator, and I have been working with a consultant. It's the MIT gang, who I've been talking about for a year or so, and they had formed their own company called Dynamic Ideas. So we are able to get them on board to help us do some scenario planning for our general ed routes. And they're working with the student groupings that our IS folks put together probably at the end of August. So we've got, I think, about a little over 11,000 students who will be routed in the 2 groups, so the Tuesday, Wednesday, and the Thursday, Friday. So what we've got them looking at, so they're basically running all the routes, and we've given them parameters, the main one being we can only have 11 students on a bus. But we're looking at the maximum ride times, giving them the earliest pickup time, estimated screening time per student per stop, arrival time at school. In other words, how long before the start time can we drop a student off? And then we're working with our existing start times or our existing bell times. So parameter wise, I've had them run 2 scenarios so far. In the first scenario, I gave them a maximum ride time of 30 minutes. And the reason I did that is because I knew we were going to have to do looping. So I thought, well, if we get a route that's 60 minutes long or 45 minutes long, they're not going to be able to loop back. So I said, let's start with 30 minutes. We've got 30-second screening time per student. And what that does is give us kind of an understanding of delay, or rather dwell time at each bus stop. Also, I gave them, an arrival time at school. So the first scenario, I said, all right, arrive 15 minutes before start time. And then again, the bell times remain the same. So the other thing that is part of this I forgot to put on here is that the hub stops for all of our option schools have been incorporated into this scenario. The findings from the first scenario were, I wouldn't say they're surprising, but they were a little heart-stopping.
And that's 11,000 kids total that have to be routed. So roughly half and half.
Half and half, right. So with 11 students on a bus, this is our biggest constraint. The first scenario revealed that we probably needed 100 more buses than we currently have in our general education fleet. So I was just like, well, that's not going to work. So we came in with scenario 2, made some tweaks to the ride time, the earliest pickup time. Actually, no, I didn't tweak that in the second one. The early pickup time I said was, let's try not to pick up anybody before 7 a.m. Right. So, and that stayed constant for the second scenario as well. Screening time for students stayed the same. Arrival time at school, we changed and we said, all right, you can arrive up to 25 minutes before the start of school and 10 minutes after the start of school. So when I did that, I was thinking that our hybrid schedules had offered a little bit of buffer in the schedules. Then I came back and realized that it hadn't. So essentially, we're probably looking at more like a 35-minute before school or before bell time arrival time. So when we ran that, we knocked it down to needing about 60 more buses. So we're still not where we need to be. But what it does tell us is that there are some policies that we may need to look at in order to make this work. And the first policy that we may need to look at is whether or not we can change some of our bell times. What the results showed us, and I think we generally knew this, is that we have so many students that we're trying to transport between the 8 a.m. and like 8:45 a.m. time frame. The numbers are massive. And even in this exercise, for what we're dealing with, the numbers were massive. And one of the biggest drivers of this is really the high school start times. And when we looked at the number of students who were coming back for each of the high schools, on any given day, it's 500 to 600 students. And so when you have a lot of them eligible for the bus, we're having to make a lot of bus trips for high school students. I think the second scenario, Wakefield has the most bus riders. It was 66 routes. So yeah, 66 routes. And then they looped again. So 66 times 2 is what we were looking at. So 132 bus trips to Wakefield High School on a given day, which is it's just kind of crazy. So, again, is there a way to play with some of the start times to make get that bus number down? The other possibility is dropping students off really early. But then you have students sort of, sitting around in the classroom with someone minding them, but them, maybe not having much to do. Or are they on their screens for another hour? So I don't know. So anyhow, that's something that we'll have to kind of talk through.
And Kristen, a standing thing that I believe we put a resolution in this committee out last year or 2 years ago saying that we were, and this wasn't even in pandemic times, that we were supportive of bell times changing to make things more efficient. So we already have a standing thing coming out of this committee.
Yeah. And this definitely points to that. So, but that's a big change. So John and the ELT, this is something that they will be discussing, I think, in order for us to think about how we make this work. So I am seeing some questions in the chat. Jillian, yes, I think Josh clarified for you. Yeah, it's not 11,000 on one day. It's 11,500 across 2 days. If we get the screening time down, would that help? It might help marginally, but going from 30 seconds down to maybe 20 seconds, I think that would help a bit, but probably not to the degree that we need it to. And hopefully, I gave that 30 seconds as kind of a conservative number. I hope I'm wrong. It'd be great if it was down to like 15 seconds because that would certainly help screening at the front of school as well. Yes, research on high school students, of course. I know with my own high school student, she would love to sleep until I don't know what hour. But yeah, I think certainly one of the issues that we face in under typical conditions is sports and those kinds of activities, and ensuring that there's enough, I guess, light time and just time in general for students to play sports. Change middle school bell times and high school. Yeah. Elementary can start earlier. Yeah. I remember my elementary student was up at the crack of dawn. So possibility. I think when we're looking at bell times, it's probably going to be, to be honest with you, it's moving elementaries a little later would probably do it. And I know it's probably like, oh, that stinks. But unless, there's movement on the high school level, because it's really, I think we've talked about this before. We've got, I think it's like 4 schools that start at 8 a.m. and then we've got 4 or 5 that start at 8:25, and these are elementaries. And then the rest of them start at 9. And it's those 8:25s that are tough because we're trying to transport them at the same time that we're trying to transport all the high school students. Yeah, Elizabeth, up at 6, I'm sure.
And Nancy wanted us to clarify ELT when you mentioned that executive leadership team. So your the superintendent, your assistant superintendents, we used to be called senior staff, and that evolved to ELT.
Yeah. And let's see, Jillian, screening time before the bus comes. Well, our screener is actually on the bus. So the attendant is riding the bus with the students, not only to kind of keep everybody where they need to be on the bus, but that's also the person who's screening, which I think logistically we wouldn't have staff that could go to every stop to do the screening ahead of time. Delivering the screener to the stop with the bus is probably makes the most logistical sense.
But I'm just saying that if you ran the scenario like basically 0 screening time, so assuming that the screening could happen happen outside of the bus, and then that solved the problem, that reduced the number of buses you need significantly, then maybe it is worth trying to figure out a off-bus screening solution, even if it's just some sort of parent volunteer sort of situation.
Let's see.
But if you ran it and it didn't help, you still needed, it only took you from 60 extra buses to 55 extra buses or something that's marginal, then that's not a good use of everyone's time. Like, my point is that if it's possible to run these scenarios and just see whether it's a good use of people's time to try to do that, then we would know whether it's worth the resources to try to do that.
Yeah. I can talk to them about that.
And maybe you said this in there. Is there a constraint on start times in that, like, would you be willing to propose an elementary school goes 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. or is there a hard start time, hard max to the start time in your scenarios?
That I do not have right now, and I guess that's more of it's a executive leadership type conversation. Like how late do you want to go? How long do you want to go? And I think there's also, I guess we need to look at teacher contract hours too. I think that factors into this to a certain degree. And Josh, you would probably have a better sense of that than most.
Sure. Oh, well, yes, but it wouldn't actually matter what time, if your start and ends are the same 7 hours apart. It's just, is the community and staff at any particular building willing to significantly change a start time? Because once again, if you're able to run played scenarios, if you had a school willing to go, 10 to 5, because like you have HB Woodlawn starting at 9, would these extreme ones get you from, say, 60 extra buses down to 10 if you elongated the possible start times?
Yeah.
And I'm not expecting you to know the answer to that question
good
right
question.
Here. Okay. Because obviously 60 extra buses, John, you don't have 60 60 buses sit in your backyard, do you?
You know, I don't think so. And actually, we don't have a backyard anymore. We filled it with buses.
Oh, so I guess so that's completely out anyway. Yeah, so we either have to get that number down or we're, you know, something else.
Yep. So, so yeah, so that's kind of where we are with that. But that's 2 scenarios down, more to come. The last thing I had on the slide deck was to special education routes. So we didn't run them in the scenarios primarily because they take a lot of extra care in developing the routes, and you have to know a bit more about the students themselves and their needs. And so our routing team does a lot of work on those individually. But that said, there's going to be challenges there with that. As John mentioned, we've started to plan for some groups of students to come back. The first group would include those students in need of significant assistance with accessing their virtual learning. So these might be students who need their aides to really help them even manipulate their devices and that kind of thing. And then the second group would include all of our special education students. So again, still in the planning stages of what this might look like, working through the details. But one of the challenges here is that it may require routing students multiple times. So the first group would be a smaller group of students, and so our transportation team would route them. And then once we add in the next group, which would include all special education students, you probably have to do a rerouting because based on where students live, the routes might change. And some students might be added to a route, others might be transferred to another route based on the geography and where they're going. So in order to really begin that process, transportation needs to understand really the scope of the student body that are returning. So not only the number of students and their location, but also the location of the buildings where they will attend school. And so, if they're going to their neighborhood school, if the first group of students is going to their neighborhood school, then that's good because they probably go there again with the second group. But if there is a need to sort of bring them all to, one location, then they'd have to be, then all of that would be changed again. So there's really a lot of unknowns at this point, but I think we should have a better understanding of at least the first group and those who are eligible to take advantage of this. I think later this week, I believe, is when that's coming back. And so that's just more of kind of TBD. Wait for more on this particular issue.
So we'll take once again, we'll go through one last round of questions on this part or any part, mindful of the time, so about 5 or 6 minutes of questions. Put your hand up or something in the chat or turn your camera on. Jillian, did you still have a question or did yours get answered?
This wasn't so much a question, but on the parking, and in the interest of time, it's more just a suggestion. When you showed the map of Long Branch, it occurred to me that the on-street parking, if that were high turnover parking, like the parent drop-off, it might make it more dangerous for kids walking and biking to school.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a way to flip it and have that be teacher parking, so it's not high turnover, and have the parking lot that's usually teacher parking be for drop-off, then you could alleviate that problem. Not worth discussing Long Branch in particular, but just sort of planting the seed for other schools that might have similar layouts where it makes more sense to do pickup drop-off on the school lot, employee parking on the street, and then and make it safer for people walking and biking.
Okay, good point. Thanks. Yeah.
So other questions? I have nothing in the chat at this point. I don't see any hands. I don't see any cameras come on.
Oh,
So-
sorry. And the other advantage of doing it that way is if the school needed to use outdoor space, for example, for eating, to safely eat without a mask on outdoors, the parking lot would be an obvious place for that.
Yep.
So, Kristen, if you want to let go of the control, I will put up the agenda one last time.
Okay.
And then what we will do from here is we will talk about our next steps.
Oh, Nancy has a hand up.
Oh, okay, Nancy, go.
Sure. I just have a question about the groups that are looking at the drop-off and management of people, bikes, walking, drop-off around the schools. That include families who live around there and the principal and the staff at the school who because I'm thinking about like the comment that Jillian made, having spent years managing my kids at that site. While it may appear to someone who hasn't managed that those ideas might work, I can tell you they won't. And so I would want to make sure that you have people who actually are, using that and can give you the best suggestions for how to maximize the safety of the kids and parent drop off at a distance and parking and walking and biking. Did you use people who are actually doing that every day and the staff there, or how did you do that?
So for what I'm doing is I'm meeting with principals and administrative staff on a one-on-one basis so that we can kind of dig into their sites and they can help me understand kind of how the site operates, like where do parents typically drop off, where is staff parking if they're not on site, are they on the street, if so, where. So we do kind of the legwork with transportation staff at a more macro level, and then I come in at a micro level and talk to them in particular about their site.
Okay, so what I'm suggesting is that I'm encouraging, if you don't do it, that the principals be encouraged to do sort of a truth checking with their families, because I can tell you exactly how to do that at Long Branch. What works and builds on existing patterns, which always work better. But that's just a specific example. I think that should probably happen everywhere. And we've had some turnover of principals, so I think it might be a good idea, because what looks like a good idea may not be a good idea. Okay, so that's just a suggestion for you. I think it worked well, and I think parents are pretty good at doing virtual meetings right now. And I know PTAs are already meeting. So you could use part of a PTA meeting to say, this is the plan for Science Focus, or this is the plan for the new school at Key, or this is the plan for the new school or for Long Branch or Carlin Springs, and see if it all makes sense to the parents. Okay, thanks. I just wanted to give you that input.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Kristen. Is there anything else you want on the wrap up for this, or I'm going to talk about next meeting from here?
Nope, I think that's all I had. More to come. Yeah.
You had a lot. You was like, we had you talking the whole time today.
Yeah, good thing I had my water nearby.
There you go. Well, thank you. It was wonderful work, that TDM work, all this, all the integration going on the hope of the after times is exciting. And what changes that we get out of this will be wonderful. Looking to our next meeting on the schedule, November 4th, you see January 6th, March 3rd, May 5th, June 16th or 23rd. We're not quite sure on that one yet. So you'll get those if you want to put those in your Google calendars, and we will, we'll send out the reminders beforehand on those. There's a, as other meetings come through and they look for people, if we may send out things looking for volunteers for other committees to go to a meeting and then come back and report to us. So, Kristen, do you have anything else?
No, I think I have to circle back around with Cynthia and Jeanette about a student ACTC member, because of course our outstanding student is off studying urban studies at Cornell. So we need a new student rep. So I'll work with them on that. And hopefully by the next meeting, we'll have someone who is interested in joining us.
Well, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Or we can stay all evening. Would someone like a motion to adjourn?
Can I move to adjourn?
Yeah, it's Jillian, a second.
Can I second it?
Sure.
Okay, I second it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great, safe night. And we'll see you on November 4th. And please stay safe and make sure you've registered to vote.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone,
you.
and thanks to staff.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
All right. Thanks. And Kristen, go ahead and end the recording.
Oh, yes, right.
Thank you.